Welcome to the Start Strong, Finish Strong podcast with Greg Weiss. In this episode, I sat down with Garry Browne. Garry is an experienced CEO, company director and chairman with over 40 years in business and several not-for-profit boards and leadership positions. We discussed in his new book, Brand New, Brand You, which explores topics such as reputation, developing strong values, and the critical aspect of relevance and how this relates to anyone transitioning in their career. Let's get into it. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Start Strong, Finish Strong podcast with me, Greg Weiss, and I'm delighted to have as my guest Garry Browne AM. And I have known Garry over many years. I don't want to age either him or me, but notwithstanding, he and I bumped into each other through having written our respective books, and it was occasion to come back together again. There's a lot of relevance to what he talks about and what I talk about in my work, and thought what I'd do is I'd bring this together with a really interesting conversation. And what I've got here, for those of you who are looking on this through an audio visual like YouTube, etc., is that this is Garry's book. And you can see here how to build and maintain reputation and relevance, and it's called Brand New, Brand New. And I wanted to read a little bit about Garry, who has extensive CEO and chair experience across consumer goods, business, not-for-profit and education sectors. A highly respected business and industry leader, Garry has a proven record of introducing and building brands through traditional and non-traditional practices such as social media, expertise in transforming organizations, and significant experience in managing cultural change and leading innovative practices. A committed philanthropist and advocate of the not-for-purpose sector, his services to the community were recognised in 2014 with a member of the Order of Australia AM. And I've always known Garry as being somebody who has a very committed value, in fact, beyond merely business, although that's a big value, but really to the social sector. So welcome to the podcast, Garry.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate the opportunity to have a chat with you.
Well, I'm looking very much forward to it. So whilst I've read your bio, I think it's probably helpful, given that we're going to be talking about relevance, reputation, values, impact, and the like. I thought what we should do is maybe if I could just ask the audience to really get an understanding a little bit about your own background, just a short précis of how you got to the point where you've got such an illustrious bio there.
So I grew up in the northern part of Sydney, and I guess my interest has always been in terms of helping others. I think I've procured that trait from my parents, and it's part of my DNA. And I've also been fascinated with brands and with people. And I moved into a career of building brands, fast-moving consumer goods, as you rightly point out. And to understand how to market a brand is actually to understand how to understand people and how they should really act, react, etc. And it really came back to me wanting to deliver the best possible and successful and sustainable brand in the marketplace. And that took me into business. And I did that in Australia and in overseas markets, and have spent my time really identifying and looking for new opportunities and helping people build their own brand.
Fantastic. And being modest there, that Garry's, you've probably enjoyed consuming quite a number of the brands that Garry's been responsible for bringing into Australia. Mentos, Guerlain, just two of those.
Chubba Chub and Moccona Coffee, Lindt Chocolate. Many consumer brands that one would find, Tabasco, that you'd find in the pantry shelf. We've got at least the brands that I have been involved in, at least one of those would have been in someone's household over time.
And I used Tabasco last night. So there we are.
There
we go. Any case, I wanted to ask you, just in terms of the book itself, what inspired you to write the book? What were the aims of the book?
Well, the inspiration really came from a personal drive of wanting to maintain my relevance over time. And I wanted to maintain my relevance with my children, with the younger generation, because I recognized early in life and saw it so often that when people retired or stepped out of a role, they immediately became irrelevant for that particular space. And it fascinated me to understand, how could you be continually relevant? And I think that what that's brought to me is the need to understand how to maintain your relevance at a point in time and over time to the audience that you actually want to speak to. And that's in every part of life. And there are two occasions in life when you are most relevant. And they're the times when you are not in control. That is when you're born and when you die, because your audience is actually focused on you and you only. In between that point in time is the time that you have to control and you have to work on your relevance.
It's a very sobering and grounding thing just to know that there are two parts that you're in control, the relevant, absolutely. And I was, upon meeting with you, discussing with you about the book before we did today, and reading the book, it was a concept that I've been talking for years about reputation. And this concept of relevance, I never actually really put my finger on it. But I think it's a really important thing, because we take people as they career transition from one point to another. And I see this with some people that as they're transitioning, the important thing is that they continue to remain relevant of sorts. And a lot of people get their identity from their business card, especially traditional male roles will get their identity from that. I want to make sure that we can circle back to that, but do you have a comment? Do you have a comment on that?
I have always wanted people to know who I am, not what I do, and be known accordingly. And that's a real challenge, because it's an ego-based initiative that many people struggle to be able to deal with. They want to be known for the job they have, not for the person they are. They forget, and they only start to realize that when they haven't got the job anymore. And I guess in your business and your industry, you actually have to be continually relevant to every client you talk to. And they have to recognize the relevance, not only for what you can do for them, but what they can do for you, because that is always about the repeat purchase. And that builds into the topic of reputation, because you build your reputation and you build your relevance not only at a moment in time, but over time. And taking it further, the reputational element is also tied up with values. And your values are really so much part of you. And they are part of what people see about you. And in fact, your behaviors and your values need to be aligned. If they are not, then people can see through you and you become irrelevant, because they think you are just talk and you're not action. And you are communicating a perceived mistrust in that they think they're hypocritical, or that you are hypocritical because what you say is not what you do, and vice versa.
So we can see here, just for the listening audience, and that is that Garry's values themselves go deeply and broadly across different sectors. It's no surprise when we're hearing you talking about this, Garry, about why you've had such an important part of your life involved with social impact and the like. Just in terms of coaching, when I deal with people who are needing to take a next step. So they've finished a job, they've transitioned from one organization, and they're in the process of transitioning into something else. One of the bedrock things that we talk about is, in fact, really understanding what is important to them. And what is important to them is, in fact, their values. Values don't appear to be part of a lot of people's agenda of deep discussions, but this is central to the concepts that you're driving in this book. So how might you encourage people to become aware of the values that are central to them?
So I think that we're all born or all grow up with a core set of values. And when you talk about values, it's about how you align those values to what you do or what you want to do. So if you are looking for another career, one of the things that's critically important is that the values you hold, the organization that attracts you, should align with your values.
100%.
If they don't, then there is little chance that you're going to sit very comfortably, nor are you going to sit very long in that environment. And I can give you plenty of examples of where I've walked away from organizations because the values aren't aligned. And that is a very, very difficult thing to do. But you better work out what your values are today, because at some point in time, you're going to have to make a choice and stand up and say, those values don't align with me and I need to walk away. And this is the struggle with CEOs today and senior executives, because they'll say their values are of a certain level and standard, but they'll go and act and do something totally different. And as we all know, we are under so much more scrutiny today in the environment, the community, social media, etc. You better be absolutely pristine in everything you do, because if there's any crack in your armory, you're gone.
Correct.
And so
Correct.
you need to know how to lead, and you need to know what you will walk past and what you will not. And the behavior you walk past is the behavior you accept. And you need to know what that difference is.
So this is really music to my ears, and principles are really important. It reminds me of the realm of work that Stephen Covey of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and the like talked about, where he was talking about principled leadership, really knowing who you are, what you represent. And I think you're absolutely right that in the last X number of years, there is people under enormous scrutiny, but at the same time, sadly, a lot of leadership has lost their way about really what it is that they truly believe in.
And one of the reasons, in simplistic terms, Greg, is that people get confused about values versus value. In other words, the soft skills of how important values are, as opposed to value being dollars and cents. That component of moving towards greed or belief that they can cut corners. It doesn't work. The barometer of life is all about having that needle in the middle of values versus value.
And we have a model through our program that allows people to uncover what those values are that's important. I lean on a large list of those values from a guy called Steve Pavlina. And in my book, Career Clarity, we take people through what those particular values are. I'm wondering, at what particular point did you begin to articulate your own values, where you were very expressly sure about what Garry Browne stands for?
So those sort of components of bringing together of the values came about through various parts of my life. And when you are confronted with a really large number of decisions that you have to make in life, you actually have to make a choice. And gut feeling in most instances will steer you in the right direction. And in a commercial sense, the best example, and I think I might have used it in the book in very vague terms, but a very big brand or business was offered to us many years ago, and everyone was so excited about it. However, I had this gut feeling there was something not right about it. It was a significant value, profitability, volume, etc. And when the brand owner told me that what he put on the package as opposed to what was in the product was different, I said, no thanks. Because what he was doing was expedient and misrepresenting his business. Now, there were a couple of issues there. One, he was definitely fudging, and I won't deal with anyone who fudges. That's number one. Number two, by association, our reputation would be damaged. Not only will our values be compromised, our reputation damaged. I would not have anything of that. And I would always say that reputation is everything. Lose it and you've lost everything, because you can't get it back. You really can't get it back. You can climb back to a level, but people will always be wary of, oh yeah, he did it once, he'll do it again.
So true. And so values are somebody's true north. They're the yardstick against which it's helpful to manage decisions, complex ones, and the like. You talk in the book about reputation and relevance, and we started to talk about relevance at the beginning of today's chat with each other. Let's unpack that a little bit more. You said you wanted to maintain relevance, and this is a really interesting concept. Let's talk about relevance. What makes up relevance? And can you think of an example of, say, somebody who's transitioning or doesn't have a career at this particular point in time, how they could look at that relevance for themselves?
So I think the important thing to understand about relevance is that you are potentially relevant to different communities and different parts of your life, whether it's your family, your friends, your business, or the community in which you are working or living in. So you can be relevant in those certain groups, but you can also be irrelevant. So you can be relevant to your family, but irrelevant to your friends. And that's very much part of the building. And in my book, I talk about my relevance impact, and I talk about the intersection. So there are three components of the My Relevance Index or impact, which I took a lot of time trying to articulate. It's a Venn diagram. So page 87 clearly articulates that in that you are seeing the values that people espouse to, and then you are your behaviours, and then it is the perceptible reality. What is it that people actually see? And this goes back to my point about people seeing through you. And it's that intersection that you actually want to hone in on. It is the sweet spot. It's when you get people eating out of your hand who will say, yes, that person's relevant to me because they align to everything I do. And so when you're talking about your family, there are so many examples of when people will say, oh, my kids don't talk to me, or my grandchildren don't want to come anywhere near me. It's about aligning their interests and your interests. It's about that engagement and interaction. And so engagement plays a very important part, because that's also part of relevance. How relevant are you in terms of delivering to your children that insight, knowledge, and understanding that so often young people want and can't get? It's spending the time, mentoring, those sort of things. And I talk about this when I do a lot of my mentoring of, are you really relevant to your organisation? Do you actually fulfill and have the skills to be relevant in an organisation? You actually have to go through a reskilling to move from one organisation to another. Yes. You can't plug in. You can't be hand in glove. There are obviously those who are unique who can do it. But in the main, you've actually got to find out what that organisation needs and then you need to tailor accordingly. I'm looking at a particular role at the moment. I've got 3 people who connect and engage very well. Their skills are good in one area, but not another. So they're not quite on the relevant scale for me because they lack the skills. They will only get the skills once they train themselves up.
Right. Okay.
And see what the market is offering and what their competitive set is all about.
And so tying this important concept, and that is that one is relevant to different people at different times.
At a moment in time and over time, because your relevance will always change. Because not only do you get older and do you move through different circles, but the environment changes. If you are a computer whiz kid and you knew how to write Fortran programs, you would be great 30 years ago, but today people wouldn't know what you're talking about. And it's the same in our life. In every quarter of our life, we need to be continually upskilling, upgrading, focusing on what is relevant and sustainable going forward.
So the terms currency and relevance are quite similar, aren't they?
They very much, yes. But probably relevance is far more focused and far more pointy in its articulation of what people need to think about.
And so tangibilizing this for the people who are transitioning, what is important is, in order for career success to happen, what you're recommending, what I recommend, is that you don't have a 30-year career of 30 years of just doing the same thing in 1 year. But what you're doing is that you're continually improving yourself so that your skills and your value that you provide to a market, to a community, to your organization are current and relevant.
The value you provide and the impact you deliver. Impact is critical. And if employers can't see that impact that you're making on the project or role that you have been assigned to, you won't last long.
Right. Garry, the important thing is reputation. Reputation is absolutely everything. If you lose your reputation, then you're lost.
Reputation is something you lose. People can't steal it from you.
Right. And in terms of the key concepts about brand new, what practical advice would you give people to think about reputation management for themselves as their own brand?
Firstly, you need to understand your purpose. So that's critical. Secondly, you need to be very clear as to how you want to build your reputation. Components of doing social media, by all means do it, but be very careful, because social media can come back and bite you if you start putting too much material on that could be detrimental to your reputation. Focus on associating with people who have a good reputation, for whom you know, and for whom can help you elevate your reputation. Don't hang around those who don't have a good reputation, because guilty by association comes into play very easily and very quickly.
Very true.
And again, remember that your reputation is there to lose, and people can't take it away from you. It's only there for you to build. And without a reputation, you will not be able to build your relevance at a point in time or over time.
And the dangers of not keeping up to date with one's relevance are?
You run the risk of having people pass you on the way and you losing so much that you can't make it up to be able to achieve what you're trying to achieve, which is a happy and successful career.
Too true. So the majority of people that I coach are people who have had a change imposed on them, Garry. And so I advise people that as they're in between, what they need to do, among other things, is they need to be at a point where they engage in a community that they're looking to target. How might they do that? Among other things is on LinkedIn, reaching out to different communities, to different influential people within their profession, and commenting, posting things up about their views on some things. An example of one is that one person I've recently coached of a person who is struggling at this particular point. That is a C-suite person who hasn't worked for a number of years. And one of the struggle points that this person has is that they're getting passed up. One, because they haven't worked for a number of years. And I think that's I think that is surmountable rather than insurmountable. But the lack of posting or the lack of people really understanding that person's relevance is very apparent. And the advice I've given is you need to get much more active, for example, on LinkedIn and start engaging in a community and start demonstrating your expertise by writing articles or commenting on articles and so on and so forth. What would you say to that type of advice?
I think that's absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. And when I was talking about social media, I was very broad, but you're absolutely correct, because you need to be able to build your awareness and share your knowledge so that you're able to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about for when you do go and start talking to potential employers and prospective role, that there is that chance that you can at least refer back and they at least know who you are. It's spot on.
Right. Garry, I would say to you that when I read your book, I was super impressed with the advice of being a principled person. And it made me think a lot of me dealing with an Australian version of Stephen Covey. I've mentioned him earlier on. And it's such a refreshing thing to find that I've got a decorated businessman able to talk about key principles that are really accessible to everybody just with some diligent attention. So really, congratulations to you. If I could ask, just helping the listening audience, top tips in keeping relevance, keeping true to yourself, what would you suggest as being the top tips for people to follow in order for them to, over time, keep their relevance and their reputation?
Well, I think the first thing is they should go and get a pen and paper and sit down and go and write down what they think their values are. That's absolutely critical. That will be very challenging for many people, because to try and articulate your values are not easy. And you will see, if they go and buy my book, they'll see the sort of values that one has to think about. So that's number one. Number two, I would encourage them to go and find a mentor who they can have a very honest, frank discussion and be able to get some guidance and some insights to help them about life. And three, I think that it is critically important to be introspective about what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are and what your purpose is. Those, to me, are a great starting point to get on the journey of where you need to go. Coupled with what we've discussed today, there's enough insights there to help good people to get on their way to have a successful second career.
And again, I'm going to reiterate that from a values perspective, if people want to have some guidelines, I've used them in my books around Steve Pavlina's very long list, about 400 plus values. One of the things that's helpful is not only having a word, like, for example, integrity, or what that actually means to somebody, to themselves. So a behavior around that. So I show integrity when, and then there's certain experiences there. So values are very, very important. The second thing is when it comes to mentoring, I don't think it's ever too late to ever have a mentor. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And a mentor doesn't have to be older than you, can be younger than you.
Yes.
I can give you plenty of examples of people who've got mentors who are younger.
But choose a mentor wisely.
Absolutely.
The other thing happens to be around strengths and weaknesses. And part of that you're recommending is, if I try and summarize that, and that's around self-awareness. And the important thing is, the more aware you are of yourself, your foibles, your strengths, etc., the better it is. And then in terms of purpose, I must say, I personally struggle with that. I have been struggling for a long time. And when I coach people, I find that about 1 or 2% of people that I coach have a purpose. I don't think it's impossible, however, and I tell people this, I don't think it's impossible to be career enriched without a purpose. So about 1 or 2% of people have got a purpose, but I find the people who have a purpose are super enriched, what I call super enriched in their career. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Finding your purpose doesn't come overnight. A lot of young people that I mentor, I start them off by asking them, do they know what an elevator statement is? And the majority of them know what it is, but they don't know how to put one together. And that's the way I start helping people with identifying and giving examples of what elevator statements are. I might send them away. It takes them a month, they come back and they haven't done much more than what we did in the discussion, because it is the sort of thing that needs to be worked on and worked on. And, purpose doesn't come overnight.
No, it certainly doesn't. I know that I'm going to share with the audience, and that is that in fact, I posted up on my LinkedIn, you know this, that I ended up having recent stents put into my heart. Having experienced a near-death experience really grounded me, and it made me a lot more aware of what I want to contribute to the world as a result of being given a second chance. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to get a stent or has to have a near-death experience, but thinking about what does really work on the heart helps to work in a figurative sense, helps to ground people with a purpose.
I think you're absolutely right.
I'm showing this book again, brand new by Garry Browne. And we're going to have a link to the book in the show notes below. I want to just say to Garry, thanks so very, very much for spending time on this deep matter. I found the book incredibly easy to read and at the same time very deep. So really, again, congratulations to you on that. And I look forward to inviting you back actually on where we can deeper dive into some of the concepts another time.
Be delighted, Greg.
Thank you.